You might remember that in our last lesson, we took the art room outside and we made art using natural materials from the earth. We looked at mud murals, stick sculptures, and even talked about how artists use the ground itself to tell a story. Well, today we're going even deeper into the ground because today we're learning all about clay, where it comes from, what we can do with it, and how artists use it to tell powerful stories. Before we get started, let's go over our learning objectives for today. I can identify the stages of clay and the basic steps clay goes through before and after firing. I can demonstrate how to use slip and score to attach clay pieces. I can create a pinch pot using hand building techniques. And lastly, I can design a clay piece that tells a story or shares a personal idea. Before we jump into what clay is, let's go over the materials that you will need today. Today, you will need clay. Make sure to keep it wrapped in the plastic when you're not using it so it doesn't dry out. You'll need your pottery carving tools, a fork. You'll be using this for scoring, a canvas mat or a board. This keeps the clay from sticking to the table, a piece of plastic to wrap your finished clay project and keep it from drying out too fast. And lastly, a device to upload your work to Google Classroom. I would also recommend that if you have an art smock like this one or a t-shirt that you don't mind getting dirty, I would put that on as well. Fun fact, did you know some of the oldest clay pots ever found are over 18,000 years old? That means people have been shaping stories out of clay long before pencils or even paintbrushes were ever invented. To get things started in the clay world, let's talk a little bit about clay before we start even using it. Clay is a natural material that comes straight from the earth. It's made from really tiny pieces of minerals, kind of like superfine rock dust, that have been broken down over a long time. A lot of it forms when bigger rocks, like granite, get weathered and worn away. You can usually find clay in soil near riverbeds, lakes, or other places that have stayed wet for a long time. That moisture helps the clay form. When clay is wet, it's soft and bendy. That's why it's so great for shaping and sculpting. But when it dries and gets fired in a kiln, it turns really solid and strong. And did you know? Different places around the world have different kinds of clay. Some are dark and gritty, some are super soft and white, and that's why we have things like earthenware, stoneware, and porcelain. Each one acts a little differently, depending on where it came from and how hot it gets in the fire. Now, let's talk about the different stages of clay. Clay doesn't stay the same forever. It goes through a few important changes. Each stage feels different, and artists use each one in different ways. For starters, we have slip. Slip is a watery clay. It's kind of like clay glue. We attach it to pieces together by scoring and slipping. I'll go over all of that later on. Plastic clay. Plastic is a soft and bendy. That's what we use to sculpt and bend our work. Leather hard. Leather hard clay is when the clay starts to dry and gets a little firm. It's perfect for carving as well as attaching. Bone dry or greenware is totally dry and fragile. It is not safe to build with anymore. If you try to attach something now at this stage in bone dry, it will probably crack off and break your piece. Bisqueware. Bisqueware is what we call clay after it's been fired in the kiln for the first time. It's hard, but not shiny and ready to be used yet. Glazeware is the final clay stage. That is when the clay has been fully fired again for the second time after glaze has been added. This is when our pieces become shiny, colorful, and strong. Now, students, which stage do you think we're using today? Yes, we are going to be using the plastic stage. That is the one that is soft and moldable, perfect for what we are making today. Now, what would happen if you try to add clay to something that's already bone dry? That's right, it won't stick. Once it's bone dry, the clay can't absorb any more water or join with new pieces. It is way too fragile and it will crack and fall apart. Now, let's go over a few more important terms you'll hear throughout today's lesson. First one, and we've already talked about it, is kiln. This is a special oven for ceramics that gets super hot enough to turn clay into our ceramic pieces. Our pieces will go into the kiln twice, once to become bisqueware and the second time after they've been glazed. Slip and score. Slip and scoring is when we use the slip clay, or water, our clay glue, and attach our pieces of clay to one another by scoring, which is scratching away some of the clay. I'll show you and explain this more when we get to that demo later on, but just know that it is super important step in clay making. Additive. This means adding clay to your piece, like attaching ears, handles, or shapes. Subtractive. This means taking clay away, like carving textures or cutting lines into our surface. That was a lot of information just now. Let's do a quick short activity to help us recall what we just learned. I'll show you some pictures of clay in different stages. Can you help me figure out which clay stage is ready for shaping? That's right, the plastic stage. You can tell because it looks soft and it hasn't been dried out yet. Which one is going into the kiln? Yep, that would be the bone dry one. It's totally dry and feels chalky. We have to be very careful not to break it. Now, lastly, which one has glaze on it? You got it. The glazeware is the shiny and colorful piece of clay. That's because it's already been through the second firing. All right, so we've gone over what clay is and the different stages it goes through. So now I think it's time we actually figure out what we're going to be making using clay. Today, you're going to be making your very own pinch pots. And here's the added fun part. Your pinch pot will tell a story. It could be a story about your favorite animal, your family, a made-up creature, or even something inspired by a trip you took, like snorkeling or going to the mountains. There's no wrong answer as long as it's something that makes you happy. We'll be using additive techniques. That means adding clay to build up shapes, and subtractive techniques, where we carve into the clay to make lines or textures. Each of your pinch pots will have at least 3 additives and 2 subtractives. But before we start building, let's get some inspiration from a few artists who use clay to tell their own stories. Artist number 1, and this artist happens to be one of my favorite ceramic artists. This is Roberto Lugo. He makes vases and pots that look like ancient ceramic pieces, like ancient Greek vases. But if you look closely, you'll see graffiti, portraits, and maybe some hip-hop symbols. He blends traditional ceramic forms with stories about race, poverty, history, and resilience. His work often features portraits of people he admires, like activists, rappers, family members, and historical figures, placed onto fine porcelain shapes. Roberto's goal is to show that his culture, his family, and his community belong in the art world just as much as anyone else's. By putting powerful portraits and symbols on elegant pottery forms, he connects tradition with lived experience. Now, students, when looking at Roberto's pieces, what stories do you think his pottery is trying to tell? How is his artwork different from ancient pots we might see? And if you were to make a clay pot about your own story, what might you put on it? Yes, great noticing. Martin Luther King Jr. is such an important figure. And look how Roberto Lugo decorated this teapot with gold and patterns. It makes it feel really special, like something you treasure. I think Lugo is saying that this person's story matters and should always be remembered. Now, let's meet Jolyn Rock, a ceramic artist who turns pots and plates into storybooks. Jolyn uses clay like it's a canvas. She paints detailed images onto her ceramic pieces that tell stories, sometimes from books, legends, or her own imagination. Some of her work is inspired by folktales or memories, and every side of the piece reveals something new. Let's take a careful look at this piece right here. What do you see happening in this piece? If this were a page in a storybook, what would the story be about? And what kind of lines or colors are helping create that story? That's a great observation. Yes, those swirling lines do look like wind or movement. And I love how you notice that the dark blue and gray tones. It definitely makes it feel like a stormy or mysterious part of the story. Those little details really help bring the mood to life. Jolyn's work reminds us that even something like a bowl or a plate can carry a whole story, especially when we use symbols, shapes, and imagination to bring it to life. Okay, let's look at one more artist. This is Ayumi Hori. She makes everyday objects like mugs and bowls, but they're anything but ordinary. Her pottery often features playful animals, hand-drawn designs, and sometimes even words. Ayumi believes that even a coffee cup can tell a story. She uses clay to make projects that connect people through laughter, memory, or daily routine. She also uses her work to raise awareness about kindness and the environment. What do you notice on this cup? And what kind of story do you think it's telling? Yeah, that's such a fun image, and the wavy lines really help show movement, don't they? Ayumi uses playful drawings like this one to make her pottery feel so friendly and full of life. She wants people to connect with her work in everyday ways, like remembering a pet, a place, or even just something that made them smile. All right, now that we've seen how professional artists tell stories with clay, let's look at some examples made by some of your classmates. As we look at each one, think about what details did the artist include to tell their story? What kinds of things did they add or carve into the clay? And what do you notice about how they use shape or texture? Exactly. That is a great observation. The ears are additives. The artist added extra clay, and the bumpy parts are subtractives. They carved into the surface to show fur. This student artist really thought about how to show their idea of the dog using both of our techniques. And just like those examples, your pinch pots can tell a story of your own, whether it's something personal, imagery, or just something that makes you smile. Okay, before we can touch the clay, we need to plan. You'll have 10 minutes to sketch your pinch pot, add color to your drawing, and respond to the reflection questions. That helps me pause and think about your clay story before we jump in. So, take out a pencil and paper and think about a story or idea you want your clay piece to show. It could be something about your family, your pet, your favorite animal, anything that means something to you. Your sketch should include a sentence that explains your idea, the shape of your pinch pot, any additive details like ears, a nose, or handles, any subtractive marks like carved lines or texture. Add color to your drawing to help your idea come to life. We will be going over glazes once we have bisqued our pottery, so I want you to start planning your colors. Here is an example of what I sketched for my pinch pot. I wanted to create a pinch pot that narrates my love for dogs. I decided to make a pinch pot of my first dog that my family ever had. His name is Brownie. We got him when I was just a baby. You can see my additives are Brownie's head, tail, which is like a handle, and the little feet at the bottom of my pot to help it make it stand. I also sketched what the inside will look like with symbols of bones because my dog loved bones and hearts to show that I loved him. I will also carve away some fur to show texture of as my subtractive and his smile and eyes. I added specific details of my dog like his red collar and his white chest. When you're finished, take a picture of your completed sketch, submit it to Google Classroom, and answer these 2 questions in the assignment. What story are you trying to tell? What shapes or details help you tell that story? Is everybody ready for the next step? Great. Let's get to the fun part. Actually playing with clay and creating our pinch pots. A pinch pot is one of the simplest ways to make something out of clay. It's a small bowl that you create by pressing your thumb into the clay and gently pinching the sides to form a wall. Hence why it's called a pinch pot. We are going to use the plastic clay we were talking about earlier. Can anyone tell me again why we want to use the plastic clay? Yes, that is correct. Plastic clays is the most flexible and easiest to start building with. All right, now before I have you grab your clay, I will first walk you through on how to make a pinch pot. Then we will do it together. First, we are going to take our clay and roll it into a ball. You will only want to use about this much clay. So probably roughly about a pound. Then we are going to roll it into a ball like this. You can smack the sides to help get it more of that ball shape. But don't worry about any cracks like that because we'll take care of that once we finish our pinch pots. Then we are going to take our thumb and push it in to the center of the clay. You can use your hands to help push it in. Now, you don't want to go all the way down to the bottom where your thumb pushes through because then you have a hole in your pot. Next step, we are going to gently pinch and rotate to build our walls. See how I'm pinching and twisting the clay. I'm going to start more towards the bottom, so right around where this is, and make my way up. You can't really see my thumb, but I am pinching and moving my thumb towards the top of the clay. You want to keep in mind your wall thickness. It should feel even throughout. You also don't want to have too thick or thin of walls. Too thick, it may crack in the kiln, and too thin, it may easily tear while you're trying to add your additives or your subtractives. Lastly, we are going to smooth the walls on the outside and the inside of our pinch pots. You can do that by just taking your finger and gently rubbing. You can also add some water to help smooth out some of those edges and where there may be potential cracks, like that one I just covered up, or that. Clay is super forgiving, so if you do create a crack, you can easily say that crack you can easily just pinch it back and smoothing it out. Just like that. One thing to remember is if you are going to use water, try not to use too much because then our clay is going to turn into that slip, mushy glue stuff that we are going to be using for our scoring and slipping. Now you try it with me. Grab your clay and let's go step by step to make one together. First step, we are going to roll our clay into a ball. Remember, it doesn't need to be a perfectly rounded ball. It can have all of these little cracks because we are just going to smooth it out once we have built our pinch pot. Second, we take the thumb and push it into the clay. But remember, we don't want to poke through our pinch pot and have a hole. So just make a guess on where you think the bottom of your pot may be. Then we are going to take our fingers and we are going to pinch and rotate the clay around to help create and start forming our walls to our pinch pot. Who here can remember what's something we want to consider about our walls? Yes, we want to make sure that the thickness is even throughout. We don't want to have too thick of walls because we could create some cracking once it's in the kiln, but we also don't want to have too thin of walls because that might cause tearing or even more cracking when we try to add our additives. We want our walls to be even throughout. So as you can see, I am just pinching, rotating, pinching, rotating, pinching, rotating. And as I pinch and rotate, I am moving up, starting from the bottom and moving my fingers up to the top. All right, so now that I have the shape of my pinch pot, I am now going to smooth the outside, like this little crack, and the inside down. I'm also going to smooth the edges of my teapot because I plan on using this as a little coffee cup and I want to make sure that I don't have any rough parts on the edge of my pinch pot. Now that your pinch pots are fully formed, let's talk about how we attach things like this head to the pinch pot. If you want to add something to any of your clay, like eyes, handles, or ears, you can't just stick them right on. They will fall right off. Here is what we do instead. This is what we like to call the clay glue. The formal term is called slipping and scoring. Because I don't have any of my slip clay with me, I'm just going to use water. It'll act just like slip. First, you are going to take your fork and scratch up the clay surface where both pieces will connect. That is called scoring. Then add a little bit of slip. I am just going to use water today since I don't have my slip right now. I'm just going to dab it with some water where I just scored, and I'm going to put it on both my pinch pot and my attachment. Lastly, you're going to press the pieces together and smooth around the seam, just like this. Now, students, I know that was a lot that we just learned. Does anyone have any questions about scoring and slipping or the pinch pot making before I let you go off for independent work time? Great. Let's go over the pinch pot project again so you're ready to add your own story into the clay. You're going to create a narrative of some sort. It could be anything meaningful to you, your pet, a favorite memory, or something inspired by your sketch. Your project must include at least 3 different additives and 2 subtractive details. That means building up parts with clay and carving in lines or textures. Remember the importance of scoring and slipping when attaching your pieces. Also, check your wall thickness. If it's too thin, the pot could collapse, and if it's too thick, it might not get fired properly in the kiln. Now, you'll have about 15 minutes to work independently and add those features to your pinch pot. Take your time and make sure your story comes through in the details. All right, artists, before we end today's lesson, don't forget to complete your final assessment. Here is what you'll do. Take a picture of your finished clay piece, upload it to our Google Classroom, and answer the following questions. What is the story or narrative behind your pinch pot? What were at least 3 additive details you included? What were at least 2 subtracted details you included? And what is it like working with clay for the first time? What did you learn or find interesting about the process? This is how you'll show what you created and how well you understood today's clay lesson. I will give you 10 minutes to fill out your Google Classroom form. Okay, great job today, artists. Today, you learned about clay and how it changes, got inspired by artists who also use clay to tell stories, sketched your own narrative ideas, practiced the pinch pot technique, and you learned how to score and slip. Would anyone like to share what they made? And can you tell us what the story in your pinch pot is about? And maybe what details you added or carved in? That is awesome. I love how you included those details to tell your story. It really shows what matters to you. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, everyone, next time we will learn to glaze our clay and bring even more color and meaning into our work. You all did such a great job today. I'm so proud of how you all learned about clay, thought deeply about your own stories, and worked with so much creativity. Thank you for making art with me today. You really clayed my day. Keep telling your story with your hands in the earth and your heart in your art. Bye, everyone.